Hi, this is Maureen, and you're listening to the audio version of my novel Run. I hope you enjoy this Irish family saga, and thanks for listening.
Run is a work of fiction by Maureen. All rights are reserved. This podcast is intended for mature audiences. You know, back home we have a saying, if you're gonna ride in the Kentucky Derby, you don't leave your prize stallion in the stable. Dr. Leonard Bones McCoy, Star Trek, 2007. Episode 4. It was like moving in day at college. The Churchill Downs racetrack was alive with an electric hum that only happened once a year, in the days leading up to the first Saturday in May. The barn was crowded with workers carrying supplies and equipment, a home away from home for the next 10 days. I had a tight grasp on Lightning's leather bridle as I navigated us to the front stable. It really wasn't hard. Like Moses and the Red Sea, the crowds parted for the horses, who were the true VIPs. Banners embossed with the famous Kentucky Derby logo, a red rose inside a gold, upturned horseshoe, announced the Run for the Roses. The air was heavy with the smell of just cut hay, sweat, and horse shit. The freshly painted white barn was one of the few places I felt I belonged. Everyone here was just passing through. The big farms had their own barns, but we were sharing ours with other contenders. The Irish in me wouldn't allow any celebration before the victory, but I was so excited I had to put my game face on. I did my secret dance on my way into the barn, shuffling my feet back and forth. There were only 2 of us here right now, so I handed Becky the reins. Lightning's in stall 13, I said. It was an unlucky number, but I had more important things to worry about, like find my friggin' father. I walked over to the front of the barn and scanned the big board, which listed all the horses on the property. It was high-tech now, with green LED lights flashing each time a horse checked in. Pop's horse wasn't on the board yet, but it was early. I scanned my ID badge at the security booth to confirm our arrival, the indicators besides Lightning and Rise instantly flashing to life. Usually, I had the run of the place, but this year every exit and entrance was buttoned up with off-duty police officers checking credentials. Even before the Boston Marathon bombing, security had been tight. The Derby attracting over 165,000 attendees in a single day. Shit! Now there was someone I never wanted to see again. That damn cop from the other night. I turned my back on him and was grateful to hear my name being called from the opposite direction. A long yard of dark Guinness. Max loved making an entrance. You would have thought he was a movie star, the way the girls flocked around him. Even the stable boys had a hard time staying away. "Top of the morning to you." He picked me up like I was a bag of feathers and swung me around before setting me down on my wobbly feet. "Stop that, Max! I'm working." "Where'd you go this morning?" "That's a secret, but I'm here now." He was grinning from ear to ear, and I couldn't help but smile at the dimple in his right cheek, mesmerizing all in line of sight. Many a heart had been broken along the racing circuit, and I was sure a fresh one was probably lying in crumpled sheets somewhere that very morning. Max was in a playful mood. Dressed in his lucky Kentucky Derby uniform, he looked just like his father had before him. Jeans, the captain's lucky Flying Ace bomber jacket with that red silk lining, and a black Stetson. The captain earned that jacket in the Korean War as an elite pilot and had worn it every time they won the Derby. He also wore it every time they lost the Derby, but good luck totems were impossible to kill. Ever the optimist, Max was keeping up the winning tradition, and the snug V-shaped cut did him justice. He leaned down to whisper in my ear, "This is it, the one we've been waiting for. With your share of the purse and stud rights, you'll be an owner too. And you'll have to marry me then." "Shh! Don't jinx it!" I shrugged him off. "And you know I'm not the marrying kind." "You'll change your mind. Just you wait and see. Keep dreaming." Max turned toward Lightning's stall, where he was stopped for a random ID check. It was that same damn state trooper. As I followed Max, I avoided the cop's eyes, pretending not to even recognize him. "Good morning, miss," the officer said. "How's your boyfriend?" "I'm afraid you must have me mixed up with someone else," I said, shuffling along. His name tag read Button, appropriate for somebody who'd butt his nose in where it didn't belong. I might be getting older, but my memory of redheads is just fine, Miss Bridie like Diddy O'Malley. "Oh," my face crinkled into a tight smile. "Nice to see you again. If you'll excuse me, we have to get the horses settled." I turned towards Lightning and walked away. Max was looking at me curiously. "What was that all about?" "Nothing," I hissed. "He caught me in a speed trap, and I made up a story to get out of a ticket." "And it worked?" "Nope. I was stepping over a steaming pile of horse shit when the field of eyes settled upon my back." I could barely hear the croaky voice above the din, but the Irish brogue was impossible to miss. I turned my head and waved. The limp in his right leg could only ever belong to one person, Aunt Rose's younger brother, Uncle Jack. A diminutive man, Jack Kilpatrick was just 5 feet high, short for even a jockey. A racing accident had cost him his riding career in Ireland, as well as the use of his leg. But he wouldn't quit working. Now in his mid-60s, he was never seen without a vest and a tweed jacket, topped off with a black fedora and a red silk band, the color of the silks he once wore. 5 years earlier, Uncle Jack had come to stay with us on the farm while he was recovering from his accident, but it didn't work out. The loss of his career pushed him deeper into his glass of ale. His stint with us ended in a trip to rehab. Now he worked and lived at Churchill Downs during its 3 meets a year, spending the rest of his time following the horses from track to track, wherever they were racing. He was so good he was never short of work. He had also passed his probation period and earned his driver's license back. Today he was on airport duty, supposed to be bringing Pops and Mickey to the track. For some reason, however, he was alone. I walked to meet him in the aisle and give him a hug, worried when he wouldn't meet my eye. "Where are they?"
"I don't know. The plane came in early from Dublin with Brendan and Star Dancer. But our boys weren't on it."
"What do you mean?" I started unbuttoning my vest as it was constricting around me like a vice. I had been pushing everything down for the last few days, but the fear was waiting just below the surface. I was scared for Pops and Mickey, scared for the horses, scared for Max and the captain. I leaned against the stable wall to get my breath. "What's wrong?" Max asked, hurrying over to us. "Pops and Mickey weren't on the flight." "Jesus!" He rubbed a warm hand against my arm, slow and soothing. "It's okay. You know how Mickey hates crowds. He probably had a tantrum and wouldn't get on the plane. Wouldn't be the first time.
I'm sorry.
His sobriety chip falling from his trembling fingers onto the straw. Max picked it up and handed it to him. It's not your fault. I'm sure everything is fine. He continued to pat me as he would a frightened mare. Jack, would you please help Becky get Lightning settled in? You have such a way with him. He did, too. He pulled a shiny red apple out of his pocket, and Lightning poked his head out of the stable, always one to sense a nearby treat. A mane of black silk tickled Jack's face as he nestled into the horse's neck.
Give me some sugar, you old brute.
It's going to be all right, Max murmured, as Jack began giving Lightning a rub-down. I looked him dead in the eye. Name one horseman who ever missed his flight to the Kentucky Derby. My father had waited 50 years to have a horse he owned, albeit partially, run in the Kentucky Derby. This was his first time coming to Churchill Downs, his first passport, and the first time bringing his son to America. A hard-headed, stubborn Irishman. Pops never would have missed that flight if he could help it. You're under a lot of stress, Max said. Don't overreact. Max, this isn't right, I huffed back, and you know it. Is having a meltdown going to help your father or Mickey? He pulled me into a tight embrace, and for a moment I hung suspended, the gentle movement of breath lulling the nerves away. I have to try to call him, I said, pushing him off as I was feeling claustrophobic. Max put his hand on my shoulder and gave me space. The man had the same magic with me that Uncle Jack had with the horses. They'll be all right. Your dad is a master of sticky situations. I know. But Pops wasn't his old self anymore. A long, hard life and too much booze had taken its toll. As I sat down outside the main entrance, I pulled my mother's silver rosary out of the pocket in my vest. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee, I whispered. Let this be one of his screw-ups. Please, God.
Red!
My breath hitched, and I turned quickly. There were only 2 people in the world allowed to call me by that name, Pops and Mickey. I hated it with a passion, but Red was one of the few words Mickey said, so I allowed it. Instead, it was Brendan Kilcullen. Bloody hell! Brendan and I had been childhood friends, and I recognized him from the newspaper clippings Pops had sent throughout the year. These days, he was Pop's business partner. We hadn't seen each other since I left to go to boarding school. After a life spent racing horses in Europe, this was his first trip to the Derby, too. 15 years hadn't robbed him of his stubborn cowlick or strawberry blonde hair and shifty eyes. I had known him anywhere. Boss Joe and Brendan's father had a falling out over a business deal and tried to keep us apart. It hadn't worked, but when I left for the States, I know he must have felt abandoned.
Where's your old man? He was supposed to be on the plane.
I took a deep breath and covered my anxiety with a hug. Welcome to Louisville. It's so good to see you again. It was not hard to see the boy as the man stood before me. Now the owner of Kilcullen Farms, we both knew the family stud owed its reputation to my father's talent. They owned the majority share of Pop's horse, but I never knew the full story of how that had come about, like most of my family's secrets. Brendan's father was an evil man and an even worse drunk, who had beaten him and his mother every chance he could. Pops had warned me that Brendan had a short fuse, but I was yet to witness it. Why he had become partners with him was a mystery to me. He must have needed the money. Brendan held on to me a little longer than I was comfortable with, so I took a step back. "He'll be here, Brendan. He's a man of his word."
He's a tinker.
He shook his head in frustration.
You can't escape being a crook when it's in your blood.
Now I was pissed. "Well, you would know." A warm hand landed on my shoulder, Max suddenly standing behind me. For a man who was over 6'2" and 200 pounds, he sure was light on his feet. "Max, this is Brendan Cucullin. He's an old friend from Ireland. Brendan, meet Max Burrows, my good friend and racing partner."
I hope you're prepared to lose, Max.
Brendan said with a cool smile. "The betting men have put their money on Lightning," Max answered proudly. "Bridie's a genius when it comes to breeding."
Her father thinks he can beat her. Then again, the man's a degenerate.
Max tensed. "Now that's uncalled for." "Let it go," I said, pulling at his arm. I didn't want any more trouble, and besides, it was hard not to feel sorry for Brendan. His father had made a deal with the devil, my grandfather, and Brendan paid the price. We also shared a secret. Brendan was a traveler, too. His family was called Settled when his father bought their land and built upon it. This was a bone of contention between the traveler clans, as if one way of life was less acceptable than the other. The fact that we never talked about our roots was just one more thing Brendan and I had in common. My old friend stalked off, and Max put his arm around me. "Come on, we have to get ready for the luncheon. It's your big day." I smiled weakly. "I'll meet you there." "Like hell. You'll ditch me as soon as I'm out of your sight." He squeezed and let me go. "Your father wouldn't want you to miss this just because he missed a flight." We'll be in and out in less than an hour. Each year, Racing Today, an international thoroughbred newspaper based in our very own Louisville, selected a member of the racing community as the Derby's one to watch. Apparently, I met the criteria for a nominee, still breathing and under 40. Officially, the honor was due to my new breeding protocol, which had resulted in 2 horses qualifying for both the Derby and the Oaks. Personally, I felt God and luck had more to do with it than me. The luncheon was the last thing on my mind. I pulled out my phone and selected the contact for my father. The photo showed Pops, Mickey, and Starlight, Lightning's great-grandfather, standing in the winner's circle at the Irish Derby in 1990. With a big smile and a fiery shock of red hair, Mickey looked like any ordinary kid. "So you and Brendan clearly have a history," Max said softly, disturbing my thoughts. I wasn't happy to see Brendan, but he was the only connection I had to my family, so I decided to tell Max the truth. When Mum died, Pop started drinking. Brendan's father was a mean son of a bitch, so we spent every minute we could together, with Mickey tagging along. Brendan was my first kiss, and I was so sure I was going to hell over it, I ran straight to confession. Max smirked. "What did the priest say?" "Well, he agreed, said that if I did it again, there'd be no salvation for me. So I kissed Brendan and never returned to confession. Then I came here, and end of story." I spotted Brendan across the barn talking with one of the racing officials. Try to be nice to him. It's his first time here, and even though he can be an ass, I don't want to make things hard on Pops when he gets here. "I'll do my best," Max agreed, though I knew he'd cause mischief at the slightest chance. "Let's go get dressed, and I'll call the stables back in Ireland to find out what's happened with your Pops." I'm not going to that luncheon. It's ridiculous. Winning the award would put the farm back on the map, he said, a wistful gaze falling across his handsome face. I punched him in the arm and stalked off to find some clothes. Run is an original work of fiction by Maureen O'Creen. It is a registered work with the Writers Guild of America, and Maureen O'Creen holds the sole rights to the copyright. This podcast is for your entertainment only, and all rights are reserved. This material may not be published, broadcast, rewritten, or redistributed in whole or in part without the express written permission of Maureen O'Creen. All characters appearing in this work are fictitious. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental. Content advisory. This story is intended for mature audiences and contains violence, language, and the occasional sexual activity, so be warned. For more information on Bridie and her friends, please visit runpodcast.com.